What's up, everyone? Pastor Sean here in the house. I know my wife makes fun of me every time I say that, but glad to be with you guys this Monday morning. Hope everyone's had a wonderful weekend. I'm just pulling up the chat online, so if you can hear me, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, just so I know everything is coming through, and we will we will have some fun times today, going through kind of like the last few moments of Jesus before he is crucified. And so we're going to kind of cover some of the trial, the illegal trial. Pastor Dave already started to talk about that, and so did Shannon kind of last week. So good, everyone can hear me. I know I get Mondays, right? Mondays are the day where everyone is a lot of our pastors are actually on it's their day off, so it's going to be a light crowd today, but we're gonna have some good conversation, and I hope it's one of those things where we can see, the irony of these moments, these last few moments, and that's something that I want to basically highlight today, is how ironic this trial was, that it wasn't necessary, it should have never gone on, and how the Jews were trying to take out Jesus, get rid of Jesus because of sin, because of what they thought that he was doing wrong, and yet they themselves are doing the same thing, hypocrisy, the same thing that Jesus called them out many, many times in the Gospels. So for this next 30 minutes, hope it's valuable for you guys. Do me a favor, it's Monday. What happened this weekend? So let me know. Did you do anything fun? Did you go anywhere? Did you accomplish anything? I'm curious. I'm trying to think of what happened this weekend. This weekend was pretty relaxing for me. So I worked on my sermon earlier in the week. I had a weekend to just kind of debrief and chill out. I played video games for a few hours this weekend, so that was the highlight of my weekend. Which, some people would look at and say, that stinks. You didn't really do anything. To me, that was relaxing. That was ultimate. So that was good. Brian says she filled the bird feeders. That's good. More birds will start hanging around. Date night at Pita Jungle. Nice, Emma. I haven't been to Pita Jungle in such a long time, but I really miss their hummus. That is a good place. Dan, nothing at all. Sometimes nothing at all is the best weekends, not having anything on the schedule. Let's see, Michael Ryan, you said you had the joy of finding a replacement battery for your car. That's always fun. Anytime you get to spend money on a vehicle, that is a highlight of a weekend. So, congrats. Well, at least you don't have to replace it for like another year and a half. You know, I guess that's the good stuff. So, all right. Well, hope you guys had a good weekend, and hope your car's running better, Michael. So we are going to jump into John chapter 18. We are going to look at 28 through 40. Last week we were talking about, Jesus had just been arrested, and we slowed down a little bit. We started looking at only a few verses at a time. You'll see that John does some cool things as he kind of intertwines the story of Peter in this narrative as well, about Peter basically denying Christ. And I think that's important for us to see the humanity of Peter, but also it's good because we're in the book of John. We're going to see his redemption story as well. So that's it probably wasn't cool for Peter to have his story told over and over and over again, but the fact that he messed up and yet was still reconfirmed by Christ, and Christ built his church on the work of Peter's life. That's something that we need to hear as followers of Christ, because we mess up all the time, and yet God can still use us at the same time. So head on over to John chapter 18, verse 28 through 40, and I will read it, and then we will get going. Here's what it says. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's house headquarters. It was early morning. They did not enter the headquarters themselves, otherwise they would be defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said, "What charges do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him to you." Pilate told them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." "It's not legal for us to put anyone to death," the Jews declared. They said this so that Jesus' words might be fulfilled, indicating what kind of death he was going to die. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters, summoned Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or have others told you about me?" "I'm not a Jew, am I?" Pilate replied. "Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" "My kingdom is not of this world," said Jesus. "If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." "You are a king then?" Pilate asked. "You say that I am a king," Jesus replied. "I was born for this, and I have come into the world for this, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." "What is truth?" said Pilate. After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no grounds for charging him. You have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time that we have to gather together every single weekday to study your word and to learn more and more about you. Lord, continue to mold us, continue to change our hearts, and give us ears to hear. We ask all this in your name. Amen. All right, so a little recap of where we are. So Jesus he's been arrested, of course, and we always talk about Jesus' trials, and Jesus was actually on trial 6 times before he's actually put to death. So right now we are at trial number 4. So he's arrested. He then goes on trial with Annas, and then Annas sends him over to Caiaphas. Caiaphas sends him to the Sanhedrin. Now John doesn't talk about Caiaphas or the Sanhedrin, only to the note that it says that he was sent from Caiaphas to Pilate. And there might be a reason for that, because there really wasn't a trial. It really wasn't anything that Jesus actually had a chance to be convicted of not guilty. It was one of those, hey, go there, oh, you're guilty, and move on to the next phase. So John doesn't really waste his time with any of that. And so now he's at the governor. He's at Pilate's house, and so we have an interesting thing going on in this account of John. So we see that we have things that are taking place inside of Pilate's house, and we have things taking place outside of Pilate's house. And so here's how it kind of goes. The Jewish leaders bring accusations against Jesus. That happens outside. Then Pilate goes inside and starts talking about, "Are you the king?" And then outside, Pilate declares that he's innocent. There's nothing more for him to do. Inside, he gets taken back. This is going to happen tomorrow. He's going to get flogged. He's going to get mocked. And then outside again, he's going to declare that there's nothing wrong with him, that he's innocent. And then inside, he's going to get questioned one more time about Pilate. And then finally, he's going to get sent over to the Jews to basically do with as you wish, and where he's going to get crucified. So why the focus on inside and out? Well, the Jews couldn't go into Pilate's house because Pilate was a Gentile. And at this time, we're at the Passover feast, so the Passover ceremonies. Now, to go into a Gentile's house would have been considered unclean. So here's a question, my first question, and it's more of like, we may not have a definite answer of it, but if Passover is basically taking place as we speak, then what meal did Jesus and the disciples have the night before? We see in John chapter 13 that they were also celebrating the Passover. It was their time to eat the meal together. But we see that in John's recounting of this, that the Passover actually hasn't taken place yet. The Passover is actually set to take place the next evening. So what do you think? What meal did Jesus and the disciples participate in? So Brian said, yeah, Passover does go for 7 days. It was a lengthy ceremony. And maybe sometimes we get confused with Passover, that the actual sacrificial lamb that's held on one evening, and that's where again it goes back to the account of Exodus, where they are going to take the lamb, and they are going to cook it, and they are going to eat it in the evening to symbolize how it was in the Exodus before the Passover happened. But we see and we call it the Passover meal. So the Passover meal does occur one evening, but the Passover feast is the Passover ceremony is over quite a long time. And so here's the thing. There's a couple different things that could be happening. It could be that Jesus and them are they kind of had a pre-meal. It could have been that their timeline was a little bit different than the Jewish timeline in Jerusalem. Whatever the case is that Jesus celebrates it with his disciples, but we see that the actual slaughtering of the lamb was supposed to take place the afternoon that this day is occurring on. So we're in we're in the wee hours of the morning, I believe. And so the afternoon is when the actual lamb is going to be sacrificed. And so for these men, if they were to go into Pilate's house, they would be considered ceremonially unclean, which means that they wouldn't be able to take place in the Passover meal, which for them would almost be unthinkable. And it's interesting too, because we see a lot of information from John, which brings to light of how did John get all this information? Was John a physical eyewitness of most of these conversations? And we don't know. The fact of it, he's probably not, because he would have been considered ceremonially unclean as well. But it's interesting because the Jews are taking these elaborate precautions to avoid ritual contamination in order for them to participate in the Passover. And yet, this is the ironic thing, and yet at the very time they're busy manipulating the judicial system to secure the death of Jesus at the time of Passover. Now that's irony, if you ask me. That is crazy to think that on one hand they're trying to be ceremonially clean, on the other hand they're doing their own agenda. They don't care really what the law is, because again, this should never have taken place. That is something that we need to walk away and understand that there was no basis for any of this stuff. So Pilate asked for the charges to be given, and we see that they, in this account, that they say, well, of course he's guilty, otherwise we wouldn't have brought him to you. And yet we know that there really wasn't any kind of justifiable charges for Jesus to be put to death. So here's a question, just to remember, some of your biblical knowledge. Does anyone remember why the Jews wanted to eliminate him? Why did the Jews want to put Jesus to death? So in their eyes, what sins or what laws did Jesus break in order for them to say, you know what, this guy's got to go? Blasphemy was a big one. He claimed he claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be God. And they definitely did not take well with that. Is there anything else that you could think of that Jesus did? Maybe think about the times when he did miracles. Was there a certain day of the week that Jesus liked to do miracles? Breaking the Sabbath. Yeah, he did. He broke the Sabbath. Now, did he really break the Sabbath? No, he was doing God's work on the Sabbath. But in the eyes of the Jews, yes, he broke the Sabbath. And it's interesting. I think Jesus has got this kind of sarcasm that he has. Like some days he'd wake up and be like, I'm gonna go tick off the Pharisees today. Every once in a while I wake up in a mood. My wife will tell you that there are just some days that I wake up and I annoy the crap out of her. Why? I don't know. It's just sometimes it's fun. It's not fun to her, but sometimes it's fun to me to just annoy her and get her all riled up. Maybe Jesus had some of that in him as well. But he broke the Sabbath. He called the Pharisees out for hypocrisy a lot of times, and he's also a false teacher, leading people leading people astray. So, there's all these things that the Jews said this is what he's guilty of, but not one of those was a punishment that was any part of Roman law. So none of that was important enough for the Romans to actually kill Jesus. And we see another thing here that the Jews had no authority for capital punishment, which is interesting too, because we see some cases in the Bible where the Jews are about to take law in their own hands and they're about to stone someone, and yet we see from here that they actually don't have the authority to do that. And so when the woman caught in adultery is about to be stoned, why was she able to be stoned and they can't take out Jesus? Those are some questions that we see that at this time the Jews only had a very special concession to take out to execute a sentence of death, and that usually only had to do with the sanctity of the temple. Anything other than that, we could probably relate to like mob violence or lynching, and so we see a lot of people, a lot of historians relate it to when anytime they would stone someone, it was usually because Pilate or the governor was away, and they were taking matters into their own hands. Versus when Pilate was there, they weren't able to do those types of things. All right, so we get later on into the study, and John is interesting because he is the one that records the longest conversation with Pilate. So while he doesn't record the conversation of the Sanhedrin, he doesn't record the conversation with Caiaphas, he devotes quite a bit of time with this conversation with Pilate. And Pilate's first question is, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now, do you really think Pilate thought that Jesus was the king of the Jews? Can you kind of hear the irony in the voice of Pilate as he's asking this question? Maybe it's like a little incredulous of, "Are you really the king of the Jews?" Maybe a little sarcastic. Now, I don't think Pilate thought that he was the king of the Jews. Because if Jesus was the king of the Jews, he would have an army behind him. He would have more than just a few followers. And in fact, at this point, a lot of his followers have already fled. And the chief priests of the Jewish religion have turned him in. I don't think that he really believes that he's the king of the Jews. And yet, Jesus kind of asks him, are you asking on your own, or is this something that you've heard? Now, it's important to understand Pilate in the sense of Pilate is a man who doesn't have the greatest track record in the history of the Romans. So he was kind of put there in place because of a marriage, and he's trying to determine if Jesus is a true threat to Caesar, but he's also making sure that a riot doesn't take place. And in his rule, in 10 years as a governor, there was 32 riots on record on his rule. So Pilate is one of these guys that is recorded as he doesn't really do what he needs to do. He kind of gets overtaken by the people, and so he doesn't always make his own assumptions or opinions correctly about people. And so maybe you could even kind of say he's a weak leader in a sense. And so he's basically trying to he's trying to know a little bit more about Jesus. And then we get to verse 36, which is where I want to spend a kind of the rest of our time today. Is we get to verse 36, and he's kind of asking him, like, what did you do? And Jesus answers this way: my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. What do you think Jesus meant by this statement? My kingdom is not here. What's your thoughts on that? It's an interesting statement by Jesus, because he comes and he talks about this kingdom that is so different than the kingdoms of this world. Dan says it's everywhere. That's very true. So Jesus' kingdom is not just bound to the earthly realm. It can be spiritualistic. It can be it's internal. It's non-material. It's more than just, this is my throne. This is what I rule over. This is my land. Jesus, I talked about it yesterday. Jesus is the creator. He's the creator and the sustainer of all things. And so not only did he create, but everything is created for him. And so his kingdom is much more than what our minds can really think about. Sometimes we think that also that this kingdom can be, that it's the future. This kingdom is in the future, and that it's only gonna happen when Jesus returns. And the more and more I understand Jesus, the more I realize that kingdom is still now. It's still going on. It's starting at this point, and it may not be fleshed out fully to what it's going to be in the future, but it still is Jesus' kingdom. And for those of us who follow Jesus, we're still living in his kingdom. Think about this too. What separates Jesus' kingdom from the kingdoms of this world? Why is Jesus' kingdom so much better than the kingdoms of this world? Have you ever thought about that before? We've seen in history, we rule about this kingdom rises, this kingdom falls. This kingdom rises, this kingdom falls. Most kingdoms are around the 300 to 500 years they last before another kingdom kind of ushers in. But what is going to make Jesus' kingdom so much better than any kingdom that we've seen on this earth? Brand says it's eternal, not temporary. Yeah, it's going to be forever. Which is that hurts my mind when I start to think of things like that. Especially to think about how, things exist and they just keep going on. That's one of those things where I've just got to shut my mind off, because it really does start to hurt when I think about that kind of stuff. But also think about this. Where does Jesus' source of power come from versus the source of power that comes from worldly kingdoms? So the kingdom of Jesus doesn't find its source of power in the world. It doesn't find its source of power from the how much land it amasses, how much worldly wealth it amasses. It finds its power in the Father, in God. And so we see is that if you find your power in God, you're constantly refueled. It's the ultimate power source. And the kingdoms of the world, they don't have that. They're finite. And so the kingdoms of the world, they last only as long as their power lasts, which we know doesn't last all that long. Someone else is going to come in, have more power than them, and usually take them over. So from here on out, John's going to do something cool because Jesus is going to he's going to kind of connect the source of authority and power in the life of Jesus to the Creator. That's what he's going to do. He's going to show that Jesus is constantly being connected into God, and that's where he finds his power. And so the final few verses, it says that everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And you see that Pilate doesn't really understand what that statement is. But if you think about it, on the side of truth listens to me, it goes back to those readers, and John does a great job about this, of talking about the good shepherd and the sheep. Those who hear his voice know him. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. So we see that Jesus, all of this, while it's a terrible thing that's happening, and it's a sham. This is not a true trial. Jesus wasn't given a fair trial, but he knew that, and that was all the plan to begin with. And so what we see as a mockery of a trial, we realize that this is Jesus' plan, and Jesus' plan is far better than anything that we could ever imagine, because of this, we now have a unique relationship with God that we never could have had if it wasn't for the cross of Christ. So we're going to go to a time of prayer. That kind of ends for today. Tomorrow we're going to continue to talk about the second part of the trial with Pilate. And again, Pilate finds nothing wrong with Jesus, and yet he still doesn't do the right thing. He still doesn't do what was charged of him. He found that Jesus wasn't a revolutionary, and in fact, the last verse of this chapter says, "No, we want Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a revolutionary. Barabbas was the one that actually caused an insurrection, and yet he's going to get released. And so there's a lot of irony in this chapter. But we're going to save that for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go through chapter 19. But what prayers do you guys have? I know things are slowly getting back to normal. I actually wore a Yankees hat today because looks like baseball's starting back up. Maybe for some of you, that's a good thing. But anybody else we need to be praying back? Emma said freedom. Gotcha. Yeah, Freedom was a student in my youth ministry. She's now a young adult, and she is struggling with decision making. And so we need to pray for freedom, just to pray that God can get a hold of her, because she's surrounded by people that love her, but she still doesn't do the right thing. Definitely lift up freedom. Definitely lift up those who are struggling with COVID right now, with the symptoms, with just everything that comes with it. All right, well, I'll start praying, and if you want to throw in anything else, feel free, and I'll take a peek right before we end. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you that we can study your word and hear about this mockery of a trial, Lord. And I know it sounds so unfair, and yet this was your will. This was the plan. And Lord, I'm thankful that you died a shameful, humiliating death because you loved us. And Lord, I truly don't grasp that all the time, but I pray that every day you remind me of your sacrifice and that I won't waste that gift that you've given me. Lord, I want to lift up those who are hurting from COVID, those who are sick right now. Lord, be with them. Give them a special touch, a healing touch. Lord, be with our frontline workers, our hospitals, our healthcare professionals. They are inundated. They are doing their best to treat as many people as possible, Lord, but it almost seems like an impossible task. Lord, would you just fill them with energy? Would you just give them everything that they need to make the wisest decisions possible? Lord, be with our leaders as we are trying to make the best decisions of how to deal with this and how to keep people safe. Lord, we ask for you to be involved in this situation with Freedom. Lord, I ask that you just remind her of how much she's loved. Love, and show her, Lord, that she has people that love her and are fighting for her and that are surrounding her. And Lord, just show her that those people are the wise influences and not the other that are giving her bad advice. Be with Tyler and Emma as they work through that situation, Lord. And Lord, we ask that for anybody else, just be with them, Lord. Just remind them of how much loved people are, and that you are sustaining this world. You are giving us energy, and even though we don't see it, you are in control. Help us reconfirm our faith in that, Lord. So, Lord, as we go throughout this week, continue to challenge us, motivate us, and we ask all this in your name. Amen. All right, guys, it was fun being with you. I enjoy being with you guys every single Monday. And so for the rest of the week, come back 11:30 from Monday through Friday, and we're going to continue walking through these last moments in John. So hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and love you guys.